St. Patrick's Day 2013, was in a really bad car accident where I lost my. The only thing I remember was that it's only a failure if you. I was very much that person.
Welcome back, investor. We've got another episode of Passive Income Adventures where we share our stories of retiring early on passive income so that you can work or not work if you choose to. Today we have, I know how to pronounce your last name, so I'm going to say it real slowly. So all the listeners, Joe Rinderknecht. You really just say every single letter in it. So thanks for coming with us, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. It's awesome to be on here. We've known each other for a long time, so it's exciting to finally do this.
That's awesome. So I am looking forward to the conversation today that we're talking about smaller market investing, the opportunities in small towns, because I got started in small towns because I knew that there was an opportunity there that larger operators were going to give me an in. So how to figure that out as the passive investor looking at deals when they're looking at large funds versus individual operators, how they're making those determinations about who to invest with. We're going to talk about institutional investors, again, with the smaller investors, just trying to figure out what's going on. And then I think the biggest thing that I get from feedback from this podcast is that we just put a lot of information out there. And a lot of our listeners are like, I'm more confused than ever. And we all know that confused investors don't invest. And so you have some thoughts on that you shared earlier on how to walk through that process so that you can be more comfortable knowing that you don't know everything, but you can still get in the game and not let that confusion and paralysis stop us from investing. So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, I am as well.
Oh, well, tell us a little bit about your background, your history, your aha moments, your wake up calls, where you started out from just a young guy, maybe as a kid or a young family man. I know your dad does some apartment management, things like that. Just walk us through where you got to from when you first, I think I want to make this my career to where you are today.
Yeah. So it's funny. My last name Rinderknecht actually means keeper of the herd.
Yeah.
For anybody watching, I've got a cowboy hat on, and so it's just bred in me, ranching and cattle. And it's like my grandpa, my uncles still work the ranch, and I grew up ranching with my grandpa, and my dad was the black sheep of the family. Moved away from the ranch, got a career in cabinet building and construction, and so growing up, I did both work the ranch in the summers with my grandpa, and then during the school year, I'd go and trim houses with my dad. So I learned all the attributes and values of hard work. Your word is your bond, and lots of good values and standards there. And as I was growing up, I started to get an entrepreneurial mindset because with my dad, we would always buy cows that we would learn what's the cost to feed these cows, and then what's our profit when we sell them based on how much they weigh. And like most listeners, my very first book that I read that my dad had me read was Rich Dad Poor Dad. He got further pushed the desire to be entrepreneur. Real estate didn't really come until years later, but as far as entrepreneurship goes. And then my dad, when '08 kind of happened, he was doing some entrepreneurial stuff, business, and just absolutely got taken, right? Like most people. And so he had a really bad taste in his mouth for business and real estate. And so pretty much from '08 to later, my parents had really pushed me to go be an x-ray tech
Right.
because it was a safe, secure job. The nursing industry, there would always be a demand. I'm their oldest son too. And so you on the trial run as an oldest child. And I'm grateful that they pushed me to do those things. I know that I always had my best interest in mind. And then, so I started going to school to be an x-ray tech in 2010, 2011 after graduation.
Mhm.
And then I had a life altering event, right? Which was my pivoting point. So it was St. Patrick's Day 2013, was in a really bad car accident that I was in where I lost my little brother and my grandma. And I was 21 at the time. My little brother was 20. He was driving. Neither of us were wearing our seatbelts. And so it was a mess. I won't go into a lot of detail, but my brother died on the scene, and my grandma got lifeline. She passed away a week later. And it's amazing that I'm here today from the injuries that I had because I went out of the vehicle for a short period of time. Remember the car rolling over me. Somehow came back inside, and it was a mess. But the lesson from that, I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. And so it was crazy. There were some guys that drove by and they came and gave me a blessing. And The only thing I remember was that I was given a second chance because I did not actually want to be an X-ray tech. Doing it for my parents. I was living for everybody else, and I was not living my life. I was not doing what I wanted to do in any way. And so from that, I realized that just like my little brother Clancy, it didn't matter what he wanted. He went after it unapologetically, didn't
Mm.
care what anybody thought. And so I knew that was the time that I had to live for my brother and go after what I wanted. And that year was huge for me because within 4 or 5 months, I was back to school in Logan. I was living in Logan. My parents live up in Rigby, Idaho. And I was back to school, back to work, and I got married in August. So March to August, you can imagine my parents and all that that I put them through, going from losing a son and a grandma to your son, oldest getting married. It was tough, but best decision. And from there, I quit. I never went back to the medical school scene. Went right
Mhm.
into the School of Entrepreneurship and ended up getting my degree at USU in finance, bachelor in finance with a minor in entrepreneurship and real estate. Up there at the university is really where I got my stars. I had a mentor up at USU who did real estate, so I started doing bird dogging for him in late 2014, 2015. And then I bought my first duplex in 2016. I guess I should mention that when I was in the entrepreneurship club, I had multiple small businesses just absolutely fall flat on their
Mhm.
face. And that's you learned, right? Like we talked a little bit at your intro. You're not expected to know everything, but the way you figure it out is by doing it.
Yeah.
And it's only a failure if you quit, meant to be a learning. But if you take any failures as learnings, then you're going to be far better off than the guy who quits. I can guarantee that you wanted to quit. I know for a fact, even in the real estate world, I wanted to quit many, many times and we're a decade deep in this. And I'm grateful that I stuck with it.
Traction now. And I feel, all right, that story you told, I've heard it. You shared that with me after we'd known each other for a little while. So I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that here. Had to have been the worst experience of your entire life, hands down.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting about it is a lot of times, especially when a young person passes away, we were hiking up Timpanogos recently. And when we got to the top, and there's that little building up there, that little weather station, and they leave Sharpies up there for people to leave messages on the walls. And I saw a lot of live like Joe or live like Clancy written up on there. And I think that happens a lot of times when a young person passes away is you look at their life philosophy and want to carry on that legacy, and so the fact that he would live for himself, make decisions based on what was best for him, and you were trying to be the first pancake, just do what everybody else wanted. Have you ever thought about how that might have if you had been the one who passed away in that, what would your life legacy at that point in your life where somebody's live like Joe, what
Mm.
would they have away from that and been like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this to live in Joe's honor?"
That is a question I've never been asked before. And I've got tingles running up and down my body. I would say that I was still a very passionate person. And I feel like I'm a very kind person, very much a people person. And so I think that, and I took when I was in high school and even after, I would spend extra time helping the younger kids learn how to wrestle, go and
Mhm.
coach. And so I think that if people were to say live like Joe, it would be to just love other people no matter what and to just be kind. I think my brother, if he was the one to have lived and like I was always the mediator in my family.
Mhm.
Client's always the more aggressive, I'm going to take you out. I had three younger siblings who always ticked him off.
Yeah.
And what is it called? I was the mediator, but the
Peacemaker?
peacemaker. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I think, it was funny because there was one time Clancy and I were at a grocery store and there was these couple punks that were just got back from a rodeo. So we had all of our rodeo gear on, our spurs on, and they started making fun of us. And my little brother was, oh man, he was ready to go swinging. And then just to de-escalate things, I just like to one of the kids, I was like, "Hey, don't I know you?" Just started becoming friends with them, and my little brother was like, "Are you serious?" Dude, I was ready to punch him. I was like, "I know." So, I think that may have been what Clancy or other people would have taken from that, is just to be the peacekeeper, to be friendly with everybody, and to
Mm.
just act out of love more than, yeah, he's definitely spicy, but that's another thing that I learned from him. I was when you care what people think, because I was very much that person. I really cared what people thought about me, and I think that's something I actually learned from my brother, is I had a bad habit of letting people walk over me because of it. And so learned to stick up for myself a little bit more through that as well. And it's come into play multiple times in just business and
Mm.
resolving conflict. But
Yeah.
you question, Emma, what?
But it's those kinds of things that are formational for us to figure out, like, what we're gonna do. In some ways, I'm hearing your story and I'm being reminded of several things. I think it's funny. Your last name, Rinderknecht, keeper of the herds. My maiden name is Giles. I was the patron saint of poor people, right? Like St. Giles. This used to be the biggest slum in London. And so when we were growing up, we used to make a lot of jokes about we're like the keeper of the poor people. But my dad grew up not
Oh,
far. We grew up near where you were, and he was a cattle rancher. He absolutely hated it. So he was exposed early on to this farming, grain, cash crop, and also his cattle farm just outside of Park City, Utah. And when we asked him why he chose where he was going to go to college, he said we had a couple of choices, and he didn't want to go to USU because that was where all the Aggies were, and I didn't want anything to do with agriculture. So he went and got a math degree and became a math teacher and immediately moved out of Utah to Seattle to become a software developer, like back in the 1970s. And so he was the oldest in his family. He had an older sister from his dad's first marriage. She was much older than him. So he didn't have as much pressure as you had, but his first son, oldest. And he just got to the point where I'm going to do what I want to do. And I don't want to inherit a farm or work with cattle the rest of my life. And he was like the opposite of an entrepreneur, like W-2 pension kind of guy. And so I think it's really fascinating the different paths that your lives took, because he could have been you in a lot of ways. And so you found something that you loved and latched onto that became a formative. And his was like the opposite. Like, I ain't doing anything like that. So what was it about your upbringing that you loved that you can look back on and be like, I chose this? Because you didn't just choose entrepreneurship because of cattle and cows. You specifically chose real estate, which that isn't something that most people are going to go to school for.
I think I always had the problem. I've always been a rebel at heart, hated people
Mhm.
telling me what to do. And
Yeah.
I feel like even from an early age that I'm so glad I never went to be an X-ray tech, because I'd hate my life. I've said for a long time that I'm just unemployable. It's like even when I was in college, like the early days of working at the lumber shop, there, I quit that lumber shop 2 times, 2 different times, to go and pursue my own thing, right? So I think it was just that spirit in me that was just like, I don't wanna I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. I just wanna focus on what I wanna do. And then once I started getting into college, like it's so crazy, I'm here full circle. When I transferred from doing the medical to the business world, I told my dad, "Hey, like it or not, I'm going to school for business, USU, and I'm going to get a degree in finance and real estate." And he told me, "No, don't do it." Like I had a really bad experience, and he's telling me all his stuff. And so that made me want to do it more, a lot more. My attitude was not the greatest, because after the accident, it was, "I love you, but screw you. I'm doing what I want." Early 20s. But at
Yeah.
least he wasn't going out and doing drugs and drinking. It was going to school, right? And what's funny, Emma, is that was 2015. And guess what? I'm buying the biggest property right now I've ever bought, and my dad is my partner on it.
Yes.
And
That
well, I've got all the experience from 10 years, and now is okay, Joe. I see the light. By the way, here's this property I've been working on for 12 years. Why don't we do it together?
Yep. That's amazing. It's one of those full circle kind of stories, because I know he does the maintenance, like he's
Been the
the
maintenance supervisor for 12 years.
mhm. Does he still do farming and cattle ranching, or is he full-time into the property management side?
So since he left the ranch, like you said, he's been the black sheep. He did. like we had a small 5 acre piece up here in Idaho, but
Yeah.
he's not like a part of the ranch at all or and the
Okay.
goings on there. So my dad currently he works at a cabinet shop full time
Mhm.
and the apartments on the side, you know.
Okay.
So for as long as I've known my dad, he's had 2 to 3 jobs. Worked at a jerky plant as a maintenance man, and it's just really cool now because like he's up till now had no idea what he's gonna do for retirement when he's 56, and it's really special for me to be able to help my parents with that and to
Yeah.
help him with the retirement. And I'm really jealous, Emma. Not really, but it's funny because I'm like, for your first deal, doing an 80 unit, you
Yeah.
know, probably have a net worth over 1 million. Your first deal,
Yeah.
congrats.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the rags to riches, blue collar to owner type of story. It'll make him a better owner because he has that hands-on experience and that experience running this cruise, and he knows the building very well. How about you tell us a little bit more about that deal? I don't know if you read this book yet. Actually, I'm being reminded. I've just finished reading Dutch House. It was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and it was the story about a family where the father was into real estate and he became very wealthy. And after he died, the trust that he had set up for his kids was only going to pay for the son's education, and that was it. So he just stayed in school as long as he possibly could to give the finger to his stepmom. It is because he wants it. And so he went to medical school and did his residency and did all that, but all the whole time while he was in college was investing in real estate so that he could just basically tell everybody, "I don't wanna be a doctor. Not into this medical stuff. Nobody wants to be here. They're all just here to please their parents." And his girlfriend or wife at the time was like, "You took somebody's spot." He's like, "I guarantee I saved somebody from having to be in here to make their parents happy."
I've not read
So
that book, but Susan.
it's reminding me a lot of what you're saying. It's just like his inability to stand up for himself and saying, "I'm not going to medical school. I don't need this money. I'm making more in real estate than I ever will as a doctor." And just to be able to follow his own passion and kind of separate himself from what's going on. A lot of similarities with what you're saying, except his dad didn't try and talk him out of it. His dad tried to talk him. I guess tell us about the deal that you're working on right now with your dad and maybe weave in some stories about his horror stories that he learned from that you also had the fortunate ability. Like you said, there are no failures, there are only lessons. Like, so tell us about that.
I've always believed that deals are not found, deals are created, right? And so we got pretty creative on this deal. So the seller bought this deal from the developer. So he's pretty much been a one property owner. I can't remember how you say that, but he's owned it since it's 12 years this spring. The reason that they're selling it is just like they're in their mid to late 60s
Hmm.
and the wife has been running the office and they're ready to go and travel the world. And
Yep.
they built a massive amount of equity in this deal. I think they bought it for just a couple $1 million back in '04. Heck, I bought a duplex and I thought was expensive, like 160,000 in 2016. I can't imagine 12 years prior the big deal you would have got. But hopefully by the time this recording, we've closed on it. But we were able to structure a really good seller finance deal since my dad has worked for this owner for 12 years and he's actually been a mentor of mine for the last probably 6, 7 years as I've really got into my investment journey. He invests very differently. He invests with cash. He doesn't like leverage. And so his standards and practices are far different than mine. We've been able to learn from each other, which has been cool. And he'd always told my dad that if he ever decided to sell, that we'd get first. And so
Mhm.
there was actually 1 or 2 other times before this. He's, I'm ready to sell, and we do all this stuff. And I never learned patience is a virtue, right? And he came to us a couple months ago and said, "Okay, guys, I'm serious. I'm ready." And what came out of that was we're in a market where interest rates are still really high. The 10-year treasury is still pretty high, even though the Fed has dropped 75 basis points now. Like the treasuries are still pretty high.
You got to
Uh,
lock into their rates so they can issue some more 10 years. But for right
yeah.
now, they're stuck with bad ones.
Yeah. So the deal that we got with this is we're buying it probably market rate, 10.5 million is
Mhm.
131,000 a unit, which is most people who might hear that think, oh, that's actually really good. But the market that we're buying is Rexburg, Idaho, and it's a smaller college town. So it's right up in line with what market is. We're only putting 2 million down, which is 19%. Power of seller finance. You make a win from the seller and to the buyer. The thing that really puts the icing on the cake is that we were able to get a 4.5% interest only loan for the remaining 8.5 million for the full 5-year period,
Nice.
which nobody could get that on any market right now.
No. And it's safe deal. You can either deal on price or you can deal on terms because that interest is, it basically makes it more expensive. We all know if we get a mortgage on a 30-year mortgage, by the time we're done paying it off, we paid somewhere between 2 and 3 times what we borrowed. And in a short-term deal like commercial loans, what, five, maybe? I've seen some 7 to 10 year. If you're willing to put a personal guarantee and you have huge amounts of reserves, they might give you a longer loan. But usually 5-ish years is pretty typical on a commercial loan. And when
Yeah.
you add in the cost of all the interest that you're gonna be paying, like, you are paying more, and so if you could pay market rate but have it on great terms,
Yeah.
you're essentially having a net win on price, and that's where that really comes in handy in those relationships and that patience. And then my husband grew up in the same town, actually. He grew up down the street from this building that you're buying.
That's
We had
awesome.
the same we have the same first name as the owner and everything, so I
Yep.
think know each other. Anyway, when I married into his family and I started seeing people in that town who owned all these little apartment buildings for either students or for people who can't live on campus. So this is the thing we were talking about with the small town. There are factors and forces at play in small towns that you might not know if you don't live there, you didn't grow up there, you don't know people there, you're not operating there. And so
Yep.
I was watching the rich potato farmers basically buy up these 14, 15, or 80 unit buildings. And I'm thinking, wait a second, like average, everyday, regular people, because they were friends of my husband's family. And I had never been exposed to that before growing up in the suburbs. Like small town, you're either poor because you're working some blue collar frontline job, or you are rich because you're the ones that own the stores, or you're the owning the businesses or owning the apartments. And it wasn't that stratified in the suburbs. Everybody had the W-2. So this was like a mind blowing moment for me. And when we came back to real estate, we had just moved to Utah from Austin, and I didn't know anything about Utah. I said, I can't buy property here. So we started looking in Pocatello, Idaho Falls, Rexburg, because we felt like we knew that area better. And I'm
Right.
watching these just regular guys owning apartment buildings. And that was what really gave me the idea. Wow, we should just do this. I don't want to flip houses or own 100 rentals like our buddy did in Austin. I
Yep.
really just want one of these. And then as I started learning how to do the underwriting, the financials, I realized one of these doesn't make you rich until maybe, like you said, 15, 20 years later. You have to have multiple of them. And I only had enough money to buy like one small one from selling our house in Texas. And it really changed my view on, okay, one, I want to go commercial, but two, I need a lot of them. I don't need 100 single family rentals, but I probably need 5 or 10 of these to really be like financially free. And as you're watching that over the last 10, 12 years,
Yep.
how are you able to relate to that experience of, I need a bunch of these,
Yeah.
right? That owning one of them, even if you own it by yourself, him and his wife, like that's not instant wealth like most people would think that it is. So I guess my question is, have you gone through a similar realization process? And where are you on that journey right now?
I definitely have had that same realization. We just sold a 32 unit in Brigham City, Utah,
Yeah.
where I was a minor GP on, and the difference between sale price and purchase price and whatnot was pretty good. But then I'd need a dozen of those
Yep.
to, to make sense. And so where I've really been focusing my time and attention going forward is on deals where I can, now that I've got a lot of knowledge and experience, I can raise capital, all the things, is focusing on deals where it's maybe myself and one other GP where I own greater than 30%.
Mhm.
That's like my goal for the next 5, 10 years is to buy a couple hundred to thousands of units where I'm greater than 30%. I think this deal, and I think though, because we're very aware and cognizant of that cash flow number, because like right
Mhm.
now I'm just trying to get to, okay, how quickly can I get to 20K a month passive, right? Not including acquisition fees or any of that, just pure
Cash
cash
flow.
flow.
Yep.
And so as I just did a deal with my partner, Levi Allen, up in Missoula, Montana, where we structured a really cool deal. Again, deals aren't found, they're created. And we're going to create a really cool scenario for ourselves where We did a 2-year pref equity deal where we're not going to get paid a dime for 2 years because we're paying between 12 and 14% to our investors. But we got such a good deal on it that after we refinance that money out in 2 years, it's just going to be Levi and I owning it with no investors. Trying to do more of those deals where I think there's two kind of deals that we're trying to do is the one with a high pref equity for guys, investors who want the short-term liquidity, the short-term liquidity options and higher rates. This Idaho deal is unique in that we're looking 10, 20, 30 years down the road with this one as a legacy asset, especially where it's what I'm doing
Yeah.
with cats. We want it to be in the family for a very long time because it's going to cash flow from day one. And
Mhm.
most syndicators, they'll do like a 7 pref, 70-30 split or something like that. And what we're doing is a straight 80-20 so that we get cash flow from day one. And we've chopped out most all of our fees except for the acquisition fee. We need just a little bit to get us going. But I know sponsors who have pretty high acquisition fees, pretty high asset management fees, pretty
Mhm.
high construction fees and dispo fees and fees up the wazoo. But they have to do that and they have to be buying one every single month
Yeah.
get to just stay alive. I hate that model. I think
It's
I
job.
I yeah, and these guys are great at what they do. They have billions in AUM. And I think right now my trajectory is I really like my family, I really like my kids. And so I want to hit that 20 to 50K a month as quickly as possible, build a little small empire for owning 30% plus of these deals that we do. And I'll go back to the Rexburg deal and how we structured that. Kind of a tangent here. There's a guy in Utah, his name's Tyler Kohler. I learned this from him, and he's got a small little portfolio, social, and he's always at Lake Powell, and he's doing stuff with this. He structured it, right? It's his lifestyle. And that's what I want. My kids are still, I want to hit that number as quick as possible and have a small team that runs it. And then after kids move out or once they don't want nothing to do with me, high school years, then I plan on just going hog wild and building a much larger empire and strive for that $1 billion mark. But I think while my kids are young, I'm shooting for 20 and 50, for sure 50K a month to maybe 1 million a year in passive, which I think I could do with a small team and then grow from there. But going back to the Rexburg deal, we cut out all the fees because we're showing our investors that we have their best interest. And we're planning to hold this for 20. I have plans to sell it, but so at least a 10 to 20-year trajectory. And so what we've set up for our investors is what I think would be called like a performance bonus for my dad and I as the GP, that once investors have returned 100% return of capital and have obtained a 10% cash on cash, that
Mhm.
80-20 goes down to a 50-50. That
Mhm.
point, investors have no money in the deal, and we just run for the next 10 years, just
Yes.
cash flowing, right? And I think that I could probably be more aggressive with, I know I could be more aggressive with the fees, and I know I could and probably get a better split. But I feel like this property is a very good foundational asset because we're attracting $1 million check writers for this deal. And I want to build wealth for myself, sure, but I also have a sharing spirit. I want my investors to win with me because they'll
Mhm.
always stay with me. So
Yeah.
I think to my benefit, to my wife's dismay, I've always had more of a long-term vision and will sacrifice a lot in the short term for
Mhm.
the long-term vision.
Yeah. But that's what makes an investor investor is that delayed gratification and that long-term vision. It's what sets the professional full-time investor apart from somebody dabbling or really struggling with, oh, I need to get more money into the market or I need to get more money into real estate. They just really like nice cars and they can't get it done because they're struggling with that long-term thinking. So I think that's one of the things when I'm looking at somebody to work with, to partner with, because I've worked with a couple of short-term thinkers who are broke and they're getting dollar signs in their eyes and it just doesn't go well. So that long-term thinking, I think, is what sets you and investors who love what they do, love their craft, apart from people, like I said, who just have dollar signs in their eyes. And
Yeah.
it's funny with Tyler, he was the guy, he was speaking at one of our RIA meetings, and he was at the end, he was saying like how to get a hold of him. And he said, "Don't come up to me and ask if you could take me out for coffee." He said, "My time is way more valuable than you paying for an $8 cup of coffee." He said, "Contact me here, contact me there, or whatever." So I walked up to him, I shook his hand, and I said, "So when are we going out for coffee?" And he just goes, "What?" And I said, "But now you're gonna remember me, aren't you?" And he let me take him out with a coffee and sat there and picked his brain for, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And one of the things that he said that he structured incorrectly was some of these smaller deals, the 20, 30, 40 units, that he didn't have an investor exit plan. He had to sell it to get the investors their return. And so I don't know if you learned that from him to be able to say, we want to overperform and then eventually we want to pay them out and then own it by ourselves. Because that's actually an atypical structure. And we did that on our RV park. And I noticed that when our investors were looking at it, especially people who just look real quick and they know what they're doing and they're just making decisions really fast, were confused by the structure because they're like, where's the pref? What about the fee? You don't have any fees? We're just doing a straight split. I don't even know how to compare that to this other deal that I'm looking at. So that confusion resulted in them just not buying it because of that. So tell
Mm.
me about a little bit how you were able to sell that to investors and compare apples to apples from the other deals that they're looking at. And then what we were talking about before, how people can still make decisions, even if they're like a little bit confused, how to get them to look deeper or try to not be in indecision based on too much analysis or too much confusion.
Yeah. Yeah. So with this deal and helping investors compare this against other deals, we're still raising on that deal right now. We've got, let's see
Mhm.
what's the date today, just under a month left to till we close. I feel very confident in it. And I think our strong point on this deal is it's a cash flow deal. Like it has all the benefits that any investor would be looking for. We're cash flow positive from day one because the way we structured it, our payment is like 37, no, sorry, 31, 725, I think is the exact number.
Mhm.
And on the seller's T12, like they net 41, 42. So we're walking into at least 10K in month one cash flow, right? And most multifamily deals out there that I see aren't distributing within the first 6 months, maybe even 12 months, depending on the deal, because they've got to implement their business plan and it's cash flow negative. We don't have to worry about that on this one because we'll be able to distribute pretty much from day one, right?
Mhm.
And 4% from day one, which it's not amazing, but it's still better than out
So I mean,
there. Uh,
you're like 5, 6% the first year that starts in like month 9.
yeah. And I mean, by the time we get to year five, investors will have seen 7, 8, 9% cash on tap
Mhm.
returns, right? Because we're going to implement our value add business plan and we're going to be able to push rents and there's no other income being currently done on it. And so we'll be able to implement other income as well, which is
Mhm.
just huge if you do that calculation. I would say too that so you got your cash flow. We'll be doing a cost segregation study as well, where, you know, disclaimer, you're right, this is not the exact number, but we'll be able to obtain 50, 60 cents on the dollar in depreciation in year one depreciation
Mhm.
benefits. That's a lot of what my investors are looking for right now, especially as we are nearing the end of 2024. So the depreciation is what's selling it. And I even ask myself this question. Some may ask themselves, why would you do a cost egg on a deal you don't ever plan to sell? And the answer to that I came up with for myself is that because I can take it right now.
Like,
We didn't know what
gimme.
was gonna happen with the election, right? We didn't know if Kamala was going to get in and she was going to wipe out depreciation. So like we know what we have today. We know what
Mhm.
we get 60% of depreciation. And so we're going to do it. And it's a far enough outlook that the depreciation that we have to do a catch up on is far enough down the road that investors can calculate and
Yeah.
plan for that. So we're doing it because we know that we can right now. We don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen 10, 20 years down the road. And I'd say the last one too is I think that Rexburg is a sleeper town. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you won't recognize Rex. Rexburg.
I already don't recognize. I've been there for years already, and I go up to campus with my daughter, and I'm
Yeah.
looking around lost. I actually can't get my bearings here because it's not even the campus that I went to, not
Yeah.
even close.
So you got all the benefits. You got tax, you got the cash flow, and the appreciation.
Yeah. Nice. And okay, so how tell us to walk us through the confusion part of when people are like you're closing a deal in December, which is like the holy grail of equity deals to get depreciation in December for people who are scrambling around right at the end of the year, figuring out what they're going to do. So are you structuring this like a joint venture? Are you dealing with people who are nervous and skittish as far as I've never done anything like this before? They get the when you send them the numbers are pretty experienced that way. What's your target?
Yeah, my target's more kind of the more sophisticated investors. I think like I have not sent this deal out to even my investor base. So if you're hearing this, that like my email list hasn't even got this deal, I put a list of 30 individuals that I knew could write bigger checks and could act quickly. And that's who I've been focusing all of my time and attention on.
Yep.
And luckily, I've been doing this capital raising only for 2, 3 years. And so I built up a good little Rolodex of investors that have built a lot of trust with me. So we're getting a couple of smaller 50K, 100K, 250K checks. But what I'm focused on right now are these smaller family offices, if you will, that they may not consider themselves a family office. There's a doctor group. There's a guy who's a doctor who his dad's a banker and his brother, I think, is an attorney, right? And they're pulling money together to invest in this deal. So the way we
Mhm.
structured it is if you bring in $1 million plus, we'll give you a JV, a side letter that gives you voting and control rights.
Yep.
Because if when you look back to this recording, this year, we've seen so many like foreclosures happen with operators and deals where investors are only getting 50, 60% of their money back exit. And what I keep hearing is, man, if I would have had some say, some control, this would have been different. And
Yeah.
so I'm saying, okay, give me a big enough check and I'll give that to you. And
Mhm.
within reason, the
Yeah.
voting rights have to be reasonable. It can't be so far fetched that it just doesn't make sense for the deal. And so
Mhm.
that's how we're doing that is bring $1 million check and I will give you the ability to tell us what you think should be done. And that the thing that comes with that too is like I'm being very picky since I have the ability to pick and choose. If I have a $5 million come, I'm gonna say I want you and I want you. Right.
Yep.
I have to just and that's a beautiful thing about where I feel like I'm at right now. I don't just have to pick somebody because I have to close. Right.
Mhm.
The ability to pick and choose who I want to partner with. And
Yep.
that's one of the reasons why I haven't blasted it out to the world yet. And I haven't even posted anything about it on social media either. You
Yeah.
know, right. I send it out to guys that I want to work with and
Mhm.
be good and that would be ecological in their power. Oh,
And it's that is a testament to the small town that we're talking about because it allows you to go what I would call old school, where you and a couple of
mm,
just rich potato farmers, right, that you've built up relationships with over the years. They understand the market. You have either done deals together before or they've known you for a while. Like in the stage of say AI and automations and VAs talking to VAs online and bots talking to bots online. And what I've noticed is a return to just good old fashioned networking. It is really about who you and for a while, we were able to take advantage of more of an online presence, especially right after COVID. But I've just noticed that lately, good old boys and phone calls and who has come back in style.
yep, definitely. Getting in front of those people too.
Yeah, and people are like, "Okay, I don't know any rich people," but let's take Levi, for example. When I first met him, which is funny, that's my son's name, 'cause I don't know very many Levi's, but and the guy that you're buying from has the same name as my husband. It's like a sign, right? And
Yeah.
you sent me, we should invest.
You
Just
sure?
being able to say, yeah, when I first met him, I was literally across the street from the nursing home where my husband's uncle, like, passed away. Like, it's right there. So, we're very familiar with property, which and we've been trying to buy in Rexburg for 7 years and still have not found the right opportunity. So, when I saw that come through, I was like, "What?" So, anyway, but what I was talking about and maybe I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
You're talking about Levi and his
Oh,
that
yeah,
whole
Levi. When I first met him, and he was, like, shrugging a little bit, he's like, "A family-ish, office-ish kind of thing that we're doing." And it's just like what you said, it's like any group of people who come together and make an LLC so that they can pool their capital and then go invest in a deal together. It won't get people around the rules of accredited investors. So it's not like you or who are accredited investor could have your dad or your son in there who's not accredited. If you're investing in a 506c, everybody in the LLC still has to be accredited. And so people try and think of these investing clubs or joint venture clubs, as I call them, which that's like our Monday night club. If we do a 506c deal together, we all have to be accredited, right? But if it's a 506b deal, we can go in as a joint venture and anybody can join in. But the thought that a couple of wealthy guys are going to get together, create an LLC, hire an accountant to do their taxes every year, occasionally hire an attorney. You don't have to have a full-time accountant or a full-time attorney. Like I lost my attorney a few years ago because he booked up a huge family office client and that was his one client and he no longer had time for anybody else. So that's what we think of when we think of family office. But really what it is just like an investor club, similar to the way that we structure our Monday night meeting. So is that kind of when you're talking about institutional investors, technically, if you got an LLC, you're an institution with maybe a lowercase I. So tell us what you mean by institutional investor, attracting family office money or smaller family office, what that looks like.
Yeah. As you get into this world, you start hearing like these big terms, family office, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, just like they get huge in your head,
Okay.
like untouchable. And it's funny because the realization just hit me a couple days ago when actually Levi and I were driving back from Montana. Is just we were talking about, okay, how do we get in front of these family offices and how do we build relationships? Because this business is all about relations, and especially once you start approaching family offices, it's all relationships.
Yep. Yep. You got the
Yeah.
people think it's going to be easier to get those checks. It is not. It's not because it's so relational and they're expecting it at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right,
Yeah.
continue.
And they, most of the time, from what I've seen and heard too, it's the benefit, the pro and the con, I think, is that they want to be the only GP or like the only check. So
Yep.
they will play well with others. I don't think I haven't fully experienced working with them, but that's what I've learned. Yeah.
But also, you high and dry if they're the only check writer and they change their mind, which they do, can leave you in a little bit of a lurch. And so that's why I like the somewhat smaller family offices, like what
Yeah.
Levi was describing, because they are not going to write the whole check themselves, and frankly they're just not as big of jerks.
Yeah. That's what Levi and I were just talking about is there's so many people around us that are just they're, like you said, the lowercase I institutional family office investors that are millionaire next door. Like I actually just moved back up here to Rigby, Idaho
Right.
from Utah a couple weeks ago. And I started writing down a bunch of these people that I grew up with. And I would probably call them quote unquote family offices because they're wealthy potato farmers, ranchers that invest through an LLC with a couple other family members. And I think for anybody who's like, how do I approach family offices? I think step one needs to be like, who do you already know that
Mhm.
could maybe land in that bucket and go start approaching them and figuring out what their needs and wants are because you already have a personal relationship with them, but also bring them deals that incentivizes them to put that LLC together if they don't already to invest a bigger check.
Yep.
So with my deal, we're saying, okay, bring $1 million and we'll give you these abilities to have
Mhm.
control of your future with this deal. And I think that also builds your relationship and your experience with these. And so once you want to go to these much bigger family offices, then you
Mhm.
now have results. You've built the relationship, you've built the rapport with them. Now you have results with them that you can share with these actual institutional investors that put themselves out there 5 million, 10 million, 50, $100 million checks. And you say, yeah, I've been working with these smaller family offices for a couple of years now, and this is how the experience has been. And oh, by the way, call Jim or call John over here. Let them tell
Yep.
you because there's nothing better than a warm introduction, especially to
Yep.
these offices. You skip so many steps.
And we just got back from 6 months in small town Texas. We were traveling full time for about almost 2 years, and so we spent 6 months in the small town where we bought our RV park. I'm a little embarrassed to, I was a little judgy. I was a little bit like a socioeconomicist, right? Like I'm in a small town and people driving the camo with the flag and all the small town stuff and just
It
living a small life, like just going to work. And we couldn't find like a handyman who would take money that we had to report to our taxes, like everybody wanted paid in cash. And just
but
seemed like a lot of poverty, a lot of poverty. But then right before we left, we started meeting people who we'd known the whole time and had no idea that they were the wealthy business owners. And I took a step back from that. And they're like, oh, I'd love to hear more about your deal. Like, I'd love to buy a deal just down the street from you. Can I invest in your deal down the street from me? And I was like, I had no idea these people had any money. It's like millionaire next door, where I was being totally judgy. And I recognize like what you said about small town advantages. It's not just knowing people or having grown up there or whatever. We didn't grow up there, right? But it's just the fact that they're easier to find. And I thought they were harder to find, but they were everywhere. Who do you think owns that shopping strip? Who do you think owns that subdivision of brand new, beautiful houses over there? Who owns all that stuff? Who's selling the insurance? Who's the doctor at the local clinic? Like, I
yeah,
never even thought about the amount of wealth that is kicking around in small towns because they don't tend to be real showy about it.
yeah. Yeah, which I appreciate more. It's, do you actually want to deal with a guy who's super flashy about it? He's probably, I'm not going to say that as a generalization that all guys are flashy. They're going to be hard to
Yeah.
deal with. Right. But just, I think it depends on who you are and who you want to attract. For me, I'd rather attract the hometown town investor that you can relate with a lot more.
And it's just easier to get in the conversation. I noticed now that we're back in Salt Lake City, we go to an entrepreneurship meeting, and the bigger they are, they're almost like local celebrities. Everybody wants a piece of them all the time. So it's not necessarily the flashiness making them harder to deal with. It's just the fact that they have so many people in their network and they have so many opportunities. It just makes it harder to even befriend them because they're like, when are you going to pitch me? It was very different experience in a small town. And that's one of the advantages. And we have problems like we can't find a handyman, have to pay cash and try and figure out how to claim that on our taxes. We do have some challenges operating in some of our small towns. And I think it's just a trade off
It
that you
is.
have to
Yep.
consider. Most people are like, no, I'm not investing in a small town, too risky. But if somebody really knows it and they know the people and the guys running it are local, there's a lot of success and opportunity there if we stop being so judgy.
What's the number one?
Exactly. Exactly. Stop thinking like you don't know anybody with money. I don't know anybody with money. I grew up in a trailer park. Come on. If you grew up in a small town trailer park, I guarantee you know the owner of the trailer park and he probably has money. But there's like them versus us. But the smart kid is over there being mentored by the owner of the trailer park, thinking
Yeah.
like, how did he do this? And so that's a real small town advantage. That those kinds of relationships right there.
And if I may, Emma, I may
Mhm.
ask a question because like I've even been asking myself about this because like I've got like a dozen, 2 dozen people that I've got written down from hometown that I grew
Okay.
up that I know have money after I've looked into it. I think that some people may say, how do I still approach them?
Mm.
For my case, I haven't talked to these people in a decade, probably,
Yeah.
since
Words.
he'd been
That's
going
crazy.
from home. I graduated in '09 from high
Yep.
school. So that's even something I'm trying to figure out is how do I get in front of these people without being salesy?
Mhm.
Putting together some kind of event where we can get a bunch of people together. I think an easy way is figure out where these people mingle and
Yep.
go accidentally run into them, church function or up on the ski hill or find a
Yep.
way to get in front of them. What do you have any other ideas? I know that's
Our,
asked.
this is a big struggling point for me. My husband has a much easier time of it. You literally just text them or call them and say, "Hey, it's been forever since we talked. I hope you're doing awesome. Let's catch up. I want to find out more about what you're doing and share what we're up to."
Yeah, so
That's
just
it.
rip the Band-Aid off. Do it.
You just got, and you really do hope they're doing awesome, and you're acknowledging
True.
that you haven't been forever. And so my husband recently did this with one of his, I think, a Rexburg friend, like right near where you are. You probably know him. And they were just chit chatting about dogs and sports and kids and the stuff that you chit chat about. And my husband brought up what we're doing as our business. We collect investor capital, pull it together to do hard money loans in the Utah, Idaho area. And the guy just said, "Oh, I'm so glad you want to talk about business because I have something business I want to talk to you about, and I just didn't know how to bring it up." Oh,
Yeah. Very well could be the other side, couldn't it?
yep, let's find out what they're doing. And you just have to say, I don't know if there's any overlap, but I'd love to hear about what you do professionally and see if there's a way that we can help one another. That line, it goes a long way because I do that on LinkedIn all the time with strangers because I'm like, we're on LinkedIn to professionally network. But people are pitching me in the guise of a personal, oh, you homeschool 6 kids. What's that like? I'm like, just pitch me already. It's LinkedIn. Come on. So I feel like sometimes what the premise of the call is pretty clear from the beginning. Just let them know this is a professional call. I'd love to catch up. And it's usually well received if they like you. Just it makes us feel like we're selling them an MLM and it can be awkward. So
Yeah, and
just call.
I was part of the MLM world for lots of years, and I don't like that strategy.
Yeah, you're probably like having MLM flashbacks right now when you're
You
thinking about
totally
calling.
am. Totally am.
Yeah. But I guess to the listener who might be more on the passive side of it, when somebody is reaching out and they want to talk about business, just get to the business. Like honestly, just get down to the business and don't make it awkward. Just be like, "Hey, I'd love to find out what you're doing professionally." And just politely just say, "What are you up to professionally?" Everybody does that. "What do you do? Tell me about what you do." If there's no overlap there, then you just keep talking about kids and dogs and sports. And if in my situation where we're talking about personal stuff and they ask what you do, and I say, "Oh, I raise capital for real estate deals from accredited investors." And if they're real interested and their eyes start to light up, sometimes I have to schedule another appointment. I'm like, "Yeah, we're at a church picnic. I don't want to,
I
let's not talk about business here. Let's set up a lunch next week." And then they show up and they know that we're going to talk about business at this lunch. So that's another one that can work pretty well. But this, I don't like doing it. To me, it's one of those things where what you're doing is almost like combining the best of both worlds, like how things used to be done when you just pull a checkbook out of your pocket at a dinner that you organize for all of your local investor friends and they could just sign the documents and sign you a check right there versus how far we've gone to the online automation side of things that's very impersonal. Bringing a little bit of that old school stuff and that personal touch back in is really important. And I think that's
yeah.
what you're showing, not only with the markets that you're buying in, but the investors that you're developing relationships with.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and, like, add to that, like, one of my biggest investors, like, within my fund lives in Cache Valley. He's a dairy farmer, and he will not invest in any deal with me until I come sit down with him at his dinner table and have a conversation.
Yep.
And
Yeah, we had our on one who he was from California, and I get a text message from him. He says, "I'm gonna be there tomorrow. What time are you guys, ready for me?" He flew out and "I need to shake your hand and look you in the eye before I put money in this deal." And
nice.
we walked our property and visited, and we're like, "We gotta go, gotta get the kids to church." And he was like, "Really? I love that because it was Sunday. And he said, I'm actually not mad that you're cutting the visit short a little bit because you're taking kids to church." And we would never have known that about one another if he hadn't shown up
Right.
on a Sunday.
There's a lot of
Um,
we're in, belly to belly interaction.
yes. Although when you're a woman in industry, belly to belly, it's sometimes not the best idea.
That's
Yeah, I had somebody say that to me once, and he just looked at me like, I meant what I meant was face to face, like in person.
that's more of what I meant is what
Yeah, yeah, I know. I love to give people a hard time, and I guess that's part of my charm. But I did have somebody reach out to me the other day and soft commit some money to my fund, and this happens every so often. Somebody that I knew 10 years ago or 20 years ago, they'll be like, "Hey, I've been watching you on LinkedIn. Would love to find more. I think I might be your ideal investor because I post a lot about who is my ideal investor." And they're like second tier relationships that we used to know years ago. And so it's just not, and they never feel awkward telling me that they want to contact me to talk about business.
true.
Why am I feeling awkward to reach out to talk to them about business? We're not actually like hanging out. We haven't seen each other 10 years. We would have been in contact this whole time.
Yeah.
So
So
it's, yeah, exactly. And don't get upset, listener. If somebody reaches out to you and says, "I haven't talked to you in 10 years, let's chat business," because they probably have an opportunity with somebody that you know and trust that might be a good idea. So that wall that goes up when you think they're going to sell you an MLM, just listen and say, "Well, not for me, but I'd love to hear about what your kids and your dog are up to." It's fine. This is how the world goes around. And the awkwardness makes networking so much harder.
yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Just don't be that awkward guy when somebody reaches out to you to present an opportunity. Have some grace. That's how you find opportunities. But walk me into the future here. We're just about done wrapping up. First, tell the listener how they can get a hold of you. I always ask what kind of person, who's your ideal investor that you want to reach out after the show. And then walk me through your passive income future. You're a young guy, you've got little kids, and you already talked about a little bit how you're going to go really hard when they're at a certain point. Nobody really wants to be employed until they're 65. But as an entrepreneur, how do you see that? Tell people how to get a hold of you and then talk to us about old Joe, what his life looks like.
all right. Yeah, so you can get a hold of me. My email is joe@upcfund.com. Got our website, upcfund.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm not on Facebook hardly at all. If you see me post, it's because Instagram's doing it automatically. So Instagram or LinkedIn on the socials, it'd probably be the easiest or my email. So then as far as old Joe, we're going to be having a lot of fun. Got lots of plans for, I'd say the next, 5, 10 years, building that cash flow from 50K to 100K a month in passive income. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is like the apartments is something that I've done and I know, and I'm going to keep doing it forever. Where I'm more passionate about too going forward is I want to get back into the ranching industry. I've been out of edge for lots of years. I haven't owned a horse since I got married just because like when you go to college, you don't have room for a horse. I've been married for 11 years now. And I, the reason I want to get back into ranching is one, like ranching is also very much, it's a very good generational asset. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like a lot of ranches, farms, there's many generational branches there. And I've learned through real estate, through multifamily, any multifamily deal, there's other income that you can implement to any asset that you buy. It's the
Mhm.
same with the ranches. My grandpa is that good old boy, right? And I learned a lot of this from him from an early age, but he still feeds his cows from the back of his truck every winter,
Mhm.
all winter long. And it's cold. It's that's his style of lifestyle, and he'll never change it. Like he has a personal relationship with all of these cows, which is amazing, but it's inefficient.
Yeah.
And ranchers right now and farmers are having a tough enough time as it is to break even and make a profit. And so
Yeah.
I want to take what I've learned with making a ranch better or making an asset more efficient and more profitable. And now I can raise millions of dollars to go and buy these ranches. There's multiple things that we plan on doing to increase your cow herd that I plan on implementing in the next, few years. And I think as we know, like right now is the largest transfer of wealth in history, trillions of dollars trickling down to us. Like literally we're the people right now that are, as
It
long as we're poised and ready,
Yep.
right, we'll be able to have that basket to catch those apples. And I think that if you look at the statistics, like the average rancher is 60, 80 years old and they're not getting any younger because
Mhm.
kids like me didn't want to go and freeze my butt off all winter long chasing cows. I love that lifestyle though. Like I would go back to it if it made sense financially. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to get farms and ranches like seller finance and to
Yeah.
help them continue their legacy if they don't have a child who wants to take it. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of ranchers right now that they would rather sell their ranch and make money and go live life to the max for the next 10, 20 years of their life, give it to their kids. And so I would be a kind of a guy in the middle there that helps them preserve that generational wealth and implement things to make it more profitable for them and their families. And then, yeah, going forward, I love this game of business. I don't really see myself ever being done with it. I think I'll be that guy that just enjoys and does it till the day I die. And I really like the Rockefellers. Like I've studied them and built for their families, and I want to do that for mine. I'm really focused right now on, and I think like the kids, like I'm not giving them a silver spoon. They absolutely will work for it. I went from the labor industry to where I am now, and they will absolutely work for it. I'm not just giving it over to them. And so That's what my future holds, is really getting back to where my roots are, making an impact there. And also, one last thing is, from the accident, I started a nonprofit. Been about 2 years since I've done a lot with it because I've just been so focused, but I plan on really putting a lot of time and attention back into that. And I've learned from John Huntsman, right? So one of our fellow partners, grandpa's, I would read a book of his called Barefoot to Billionaire. And
Yes.
I went to, I don't know, I won't say his name because I know he likes to sign under the radar, but I went
Yeah.
the Huntsman Cancer Institute up in Salt
Mhm.
Lake. And it was so cool to see because on the left side of the campus was Huntsman Chemical, and on the
Yeah.
right side of the campus is Huntsman Cancer. And all the money from chemical just ran to cancer, right? So they were just like, if you want to talk about a philanthropic man who's made such an impact, even, years after he's been passed away, like that's a legacy
Mhm.
that I want to see if I can even come close to. Is And that's why I do real estate, is to be able to make an impact through my nonprofit and to
Yeah.
make an impact for people's lives. And I think that I'm a good representation of breaking kind of family habits and family tradition and going after what you want and then being able to pay it back.
Yeah. It's like a whole lifetime of stuff to look forward to because people say at a certain point you make enough money, you start getting bored a little bit. And sometimes it's just nice to have a sabbatical and then go back and say, we're going to work on this nonprofit. We are going to impact families in a meaningful way. And to think all of this could have just been an x-ray tech.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And no, I didn't want my brother to pass away, but I know he's doing good on the other side. And I'm able to make a really big impact while I'm still on this earth because of it. So it's all not for naught.
Yes, it's a beautiful story. And I feel privileged for having gotten to know you over this last couple of years. Our partner introduced us. It's been really fun to watch your progress at the same time, like my progress. So we started out with the same thing at the same time. And when we first met in Denver at that conference, you had that building that I was like, I want to partner with you on that building. It ended up not working out. But I feel like it's one of those things where you just bring that, like I said, that small town, good old boy feel back to it, yet you are still very active on the more technological, modernized side of it. It's a really great blend of what you've got going on there. So thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your journey. And I would love to have you back to talk as in good, like your wife is in finance as well. You have this great background. I would love to talk about how you guys are instilling that in your kids. You've also had a really impressive fitness journey that you've been on over the last couple of years. A lot more that you can share with us. So let's reconnect in a couple of months and get an update on what's going on.
But
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you want to get a hold of Joe, say the email one more time.
Joe at upcfund.com.
Awesome. If you want to get a hold of me, investwithemma.com. We make it easy. If you want to jump in our Monday night club where we put together basically club versions of family offices and you can get your hands dirty a little bit with a joint venture, jump in at riseclubcapital.com. And I will see you next time.